Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast that we get to you from southern Israel. Gaurav Sawant and I are at the kibbutz Be'eri, one of the frontline kibbutzes, Gaurav, where many hostages were taken and over 100 people were actually killed. What you see around Gaurav and me here is utter destruction in this particular commune. As we arrive here on day 16, it's also a day when there's been an enormous escalation on all fronts, Gaurav.
So what you hear are a lot of artillery shells that are going off. Attack helicopters are being used even as we speak, and this kind of shows that Israel, you hear this artillery and this going off at amazing frequency here. So you have air-to-ground rockets that are being fired, F-16 fighter jets, 155mm howitzers, and Apache helicopters that are pounding Hamas bases, and that shows that targets are being softened, perhaps for an imminent ground offensive into the Gaza Strip.
Israel offensive escalates. Hamas hideout in the West Bank bombed.
You can see plumes of smoke rising as Israeli Air Force pounds the Gaza Strip.
Hamas hellfire continues.
This kind of know-how, you can see the tail fins, you can see the booster module, the very thick metallic fabrication shows that the Hamas has been able to garner this kind of know-how sitting inside Gaza.
India's top conflict reporters.
This is downtown Tel Aviv, the capital of Israel, and it is completely drowned out by the sound of angry Israelis who've collected here demanding justice for the hostages.
Bring you the first-hand account from the war.
The bombing of the Ansar mosque, the imminent threat that Israel cites even at the West Bank, marks the opening of the second front within Israel, and this is something that Israel was extremely apprehensive about.
The most exhaustive coverage. Ground reports that no channel has.
On a solo base.
Ceasefire is the only way to actually bring it up.
Such steps are now being brought.
India today in the war zone.
Israel on day 16 of this conflict has pounded Al-Ansar mosque at the West Bank. So this is the widening of this battle. It started with the Gaza Strip. Now it's expanded Shiv to the West Bank, and there's already the third front, which is Israel targeting the Hezbollah at the northern front.
And the airstrike took place not very far from where Gaurav was reporting just a few days ago, the first Indian journalist to report from the West Bank and Palestinian territory. The Jenin refugee camp has been in the news for years and years for what's been taking place there. But an airstrike on a mosque with terror resources hidden below it basically suggests that the beast has awoken, metaphorically speaking, and Israel is going after every little remnant of the Hamas, big or small, within territory or outside, and the Ansar mosque attack is a reminder of that.
Amid the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas, Israel opened a fresh front in its offensive. In a major escalation, Israeli forces carried out their first major airstrike in the West Bank. Israel struck a compound beneath Al-Ansar Mosque in the West Bank's Jenin, killing at least one person. The Israeli forces said the mosque conceals terror cells of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The terror groups have been using the mosque as a command center to plan terror attacks.
Based on specific intelligence inputs, the Israeli forces mounted an airstrike even in the West Bank, targeting the Al-Ansar Mosque, saying Hamas terrorists were not just hiding in the mosque, but were also storing weapons for an imminent attack on Israeli civilians.
As the war reaches the West Bank, so far dozens of Palestinian radicals in West Bank have been killed in clashes with Israeli forces.
Israel's airstrike on the Al-Ansar Mosque in the West Bank shows that the beast has woken and it's going to go after every single asset of the Hamas. A hyper-alert intelligence is going to make sure that Operation Swords of Iron is not going to stop at anything whatsoever. And this also means that two big fronts are now completely open.
The West Bank strikes come after Israel conducted multiple raids in the region, arresting hundreds of Hamas workers and seizing massive cache of arms and ammunition aimed at attacking Israel. With Gaurav Sawant and Shiv Arur from Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
Since my arrival here just 24 hours ago, I've already experienced 3 air raid sirens involving rockets. I saw a rocket land outside the Tel Aviv airport minutes after I drove out from there. I can't imagine how many rocket sirens and, dashes to the shelter you've experienced, Gaurav. But what Gaurav and I both did today was take a look firsthand at the remnant of one of those rockets that landed on October the 7th.
Now, the situation on ground remains extremely precarious because Hamas retains the ability to be able to strike. In fact, water pipes that were used to carry water supply to Gaza, Hamas, according to Israel, has stolen. They've dug out those water pipes and they're using those water pipes and switch pipes to make rockets to target civilians here in Israel. And we saw the remnant of one such rocket, and thousands of these rockets were not only fired from the 7th of October, but continue to be fired even today in Israel. Shiv Arur and I with this report.
So what I've got in my hand right now is the remnant of an Al-Qassam rocket. Now this is the flagship weapon of the Hamas. So this isn't a replica, this is an actual rocket that has been recovered after a particular attack. Obviously we're told that we can't touch any of the rockets that land here in Sderot because there are booby traps. Many of them are misfired rockets, so they may not have exploded. But this is actually what it looks like. It's a pretty heavy thing. Many such debris are already there and are part of investigation. But this kind of know-how, you can see the tail fins, you can see the booster module. The very thick metallic fabrication shows that the Hamas has been able to garner this kind of know-how sitting inside Gaza. They do get rocket technology from Iran as well, but the know-how to convert everyday metal tubes from pipes, etc., into usable rockets that have wrought so much devastation is a matter of great concern, especially since Hamas is able to make these kinds of rockets sitting inside Gaza using materials that they're able to smuggle into Gaza. So the Al-Qassam rocket is something that has been used in its thousands, including on the October 7th attack. Thousands of these were used to try and overwhelm the Iron Dome system as well. Even now, as we stand here, there have been air raid sirens with rockets of this kind still landing. So over 2 weeks into the operation against Hamas, they're sending Al-Qassam rockets still into Israel.
The situation on ground sees a major escalation as far as the Israeli Defense Forces are concerned. Apart from their fighter jets and artillery, now Apache helicopter gunships have also been pressed into service to pulverize Hamas strongholds as far as Israel is concerned.
And the very interesting thing that Gaurav and I noticed when we reached there, or within visible distance of Gaza, is that unlike the F-16s that have been pounding Gaza all this while, they fly at a great height, Gaurav. But the use of helicopter gunships means there appears to be a confidence level within the Israeli Defense Forces that the air defense believed to be in the capability of the Hamas probably isn't there or has been destroyed in those strikes. Watch this report by Gaurav and me.
Day 15 of Israel's war on Hamas terror, and Israel continues to pound multiple locations along North Gaza Strip, where we are barely a kilometer from the Gaza Strip. Right behind me, you can see plumes of smoke rising as Israeli Air Force pounds the Gaza Strip. You can hear the helicopters on top, keeping a hawk eye on every development. So the drones, they paint a target. The moment they paint a target, the fighter jets bomb that location, as does the artillery using precision guided munition. And for a moment, I want you to see those plumes of smoke that are rising there. This is where Israel's artillery is now pounding the Gaza Strip. You can also hear machine gun fire, and this is to ensure that Hamas terrorists, they keep their heads down as Israeli forces now make shallow incursions inside the Gaza Strip. The aim is to soften the target from air and from ground. Artillery and aircraft both softening target for ground forces to move in. The staccato of the machine gun that you hear behind me is also to ensure that Hamas terrorists retreat from an area where Israeli forces are gradually moving moving forward. So very systematically, the Israeli ground forces seem to be moving forward, inch by inch, taking control of territory. The aim, as Israel's defense minister told his forces, was to ensure that Hamas does not pose a threat not just to southern Israel, but even in the Gaza Strip. The aim is to decimate the Hamas completely as a ruling entity at Palestine, at the Gaza Strip, also as a terrorist organization. And that is where you see systematic targeting of what Israel says are strongholds of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, asking civilians to move to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. So right behind me you have North Gaza being targeted, civilians being asked to move south of Wadi Gaza River. That's where the supply is also coming in from the Rafah border, from the Egyptian side, but just 20 trucks with food, medicines and water. Israel is very uncomfortable about fuel being provided to these people. While fuel is required for hospitals to generate electricity, but the apprehension is that fuel may be used by Hamas terrorists to wage war against Israel. So Israel keeping a hawk eye on all aid that's also coming into the Gaza Strip, saying that yes, some supplies can be made, but only for civilians, all incumbent on Israel getting access, the International Red Cross Society getting access to Israel's hostages, 200 plus in custody of Hamas terrorists. On ground zero, this battle saw a brief lull, but massive pounding of Hamas strongholds in North Gaza. Gaurav Sawant, close to the Gaza Strip in southern Israel for India Today.
Over 2 weeks of non-stop aerial bombardment by F-16s, and as we've just shown you, by Apache gunships as well in Gaza, has had its effect. A large part of Hamas's network has been destroyed in Gaza, but as Gaurav has been reporting from here since the very beginning, that network extends beyond Gaza. We now have some satellite pictures, Gaurav, depicting what has happened.
So on ground, Israeli plan is very clear. They will ensure that there are no buildings from rooms where anti-tank guided missiles can be fired or shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles can be used against these Apache helicopters. So all those buildings where Hamas strongholds have been, those buildings are being decimated. Heavy earth movers and excavators are also moving in. So they'll clear the rubble, destroy the tunnels and ensure that Gazan territory can never be used by Hamas again. At least that is what the Israeli plan is.
Here's what it looks like before and after from the air.
This is Gaza, and just like most of this nearly 4,000 square kilometer strip, the lives of nearly 2 million residents now lie in ruins. The humanitarian crisis is worsening, and the dead bodies are piling. The death toll is now over 4,000, and Gaza is running out of places to bury the dead. Recent satellite images show expanding cemeteries. There is no place for the living either. In addition to hospitals, schools, United Nations buildings and sports facilities have become sought-after spaces for those seeking shelter. Satellite images reveal people seeking refuge beneath makeshift shelters near structures that bear the unmistakable markings of the United Nations facilities. In the vicinity of Al Mukhayyam 2 Street, which houses a medical complex, school and a UN building, several of such temporary shelters can be observed. From close quarters and afar, the only thing visible is the catastrophe in Gaza. With Ankit Kumar, Bureau Report, India Today.
India has a principled stance. While Prime Minister Narendra Modi came out strongly in support of Israel after the terror attack, there's also aid that's going for the Palestinian people, not for Hamas, but for the people impacted by this terror strike.
6.5 tons of relief that India has loaded onto a C-17 aircraft that will be landing in Egypt, and then through the Rafah border, which has been opened to some extent, is where Indian aid will roll into Gaza.
The ongoing Palestine-Israel conflict has resulted in the tragic loss of more than 5,600 lives on both sides as the escalating violence entered its 15th day. The densely populated Gaza city has now turned into a ghost town.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah.
Hundreds of thousands of Gazans have been displaced since Israel began carrying out a constant bombardment of the Gaza Strip in response to the October 7th attack by Hamas fighters, which killed around 1,400 Israelis. After days of diplomatic wrangling over conditions for delivering some humanitarian relief, humanitarian aid has entered the Gaza Strip for the first time since the war began. The Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza has been opened to let desperately needed aid flow into the Gaza Strip. A convoy including 28 trucks carrying medicines, food supplies, water tanks and tents, hospitals in Gaza are being pushed to the breaking point as they are faced with severe medical supply shortage due to the tight Israeli blockade. Empty trucks lined up on the Palestinian side of Rafah, waiting to receive the much-needed supplies, which would be stored in warehouses and later distributed by the United Nations and the Palestinian Red Crescent.
Israel's made one thing very clear. Humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip would depend on the release of hostages. So America, through Qatar, through Egypt, through Jordan, through other interlocutors and several interlocutors at this point of time, is working on Hamas to repatriate hostages, to ensure that hostages are released and no longer in harm's way. So this is likely to be a very long drawn-out process.
Israel's constant bombardment of Gaza, a 45-kilometer-long enclave, in retaliation to the Hamas attack, has only worsened conditions for Gazans living there under a blockade by Israel and Egypt since Hamas took control in 2007. Bureau Report, India Today.
One of the most emotive aspects of covering this war has been interacting with the families of the hostages. Remember, over 200 hostages continue to be there in Gaza. 2 have been released, and that has only increased the anxiety and the pain of the remaining families. And you've met many of them, Gaurav.
Indeed, they're protesting. They want the government to get into action right away. They want the government to ensure that the hostages are repatriated before retribution takes place. At the same time, the families are equally keen that Hamas be punished, but they want, whether it's US President Joe Biden or the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak or Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister who's currently in Israel, they want world leaders to come together, mount pressure on Hamas and ensure that the innocent victims in their custody, more than 200 of them, are released as quickly as possible.
Free them now! Free them now! Free them now!
This is downtown Tel Aviv, the capital of Israel, and it is completely drowned out by the sound of angry Israelis who've collected here demanding justice for the hostages who continue to be in the captivity of Hamas more than 2 weeks after the dreaded terror attack by that terrorist group from Gaza on October the 7th. I want to take you into this crowd because something like this can never be staged. Amidst this crowd you see over here are families, there are friends, there are relatives, there are people who've come from far-flung places, people from places like Portugal, people from Singapore, people from all over the world have actually gathered, and many of them are here today. So I'm going to take you into that crowd to show you what it really feels like, perhaps right now, to be an Israeli. We're in the middle of a protest here in Tel Aviv where all of these people are asking for a full prisoner deal. All of the people here are extremely angry and they're saying that the government here has not been doing enough to bring the hostages back. Many of the people here are friends, relatives, classmates, parents, siblings of those who've been kidnapped. They're all holding posters and they're all calling for the Israeli government to instantly act, and they believe, some of them at least believe, that a ceasefire is the only way to actually bring it up. But one thing binds all of them, it's despair, it's anger, and they're raising their voice in the most visible central part of Israel's capital, Tel Aviv.
Freedom now! Freedom now! Freedom now! Freedom now! Freedom now!
Hi, I'm Ayelet. I'm Idan's aunt. Idan is missing since Saturday, October 7th, and we haven't heard from him. We just had a phone call to his girlfriend on Saturday morning, and since then we don't know anything. We want answers. I think the entire world needs to give us answers.
מתי אותם כבר נראה? מה יהיה? מתי אותם כבר נראה? מתי אותם כבר נראה? מה יהיה? מתי אותם כבר נראה? אין עושים יותר דחופים. החזירו את החטופים. אין עושים יותר דחופים. החזירו את החטופים. לא, לא, לא מרפים, החזירו את החטופים. אין עושים יותר דחופים, החזירו את החטופים. אין עושים יותר דחופים, החזירו את החטופים. לא באמת מנצחים בלי החזרה.
No sign to Idan. It's 15 days that we didn't hear from him. All the world need to understand this is more than a war crime what Hamas did there. It's a crime against humanity. And all the leaders around the world need to intervene to take action. Idan also have a Portuguese citizenship, and we are in contact with the Portuguese government and the embassy. And we ask from all the leaders around the world, all the people, to spread it and to know the truth. Hamas killed their babies and old men. This is what happened there.
השם שומרך, השם צדך, על יד ימינך. שיר המעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמור מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
There is also this war that's escalating on Israel's northern borders with Lebanon. The Hezbollah has targeted multiple Israeli positions, injuring some soldiers, and there have been casualties even on that front, Shiv.
Absolutely, and it's escalating. At least 7 Israeli soldiers, at least 20 Hezbollah terrorists have also been killed, and that appears to be getting into a full-fledged escalatory mode. Remember that Israel has invaded Lebanon twice in history. Is that going to happen again? It all depends on what happens between Israel and the Hezbollah.
Rising confrontation between Israel and Lebanon with each minute. In a forest close to Israel's border with Lebanon, fires and smoke plumes were rising amid increased Israeli military action in retaliation to attacks by Iran-backed Hezbollah. The Israeli military said that its aircraft have targeted Hezbollah hubs inside Lebanon, resulting in the deaths of multiple Hezbollah fighters. Israel has been steadily scaling up its military strikes on the terror organization. As Israel fights Hamas in Gaza and West Bank, its frontier region with Lebanon is experiencing its worst bloodshed in years. The Israeli military said it exchanged fire with Hezbollah in at least 4 distinct sites along the Lebanese border.
War between Hamas and Israel has entered 16th day, and there is not any kind of let off in the tension, which is escalating day after day between Israel and Gulf nations. This situation is now spreading all over the Gulf countries, and most of the people in these Gulf countries are coming on roads and protesting against Israel.
Local authorities on both sides of the border are hastily seeking accommodation for the growing number of refugees who leave their homes in cars crammed with suitcases. Many are injured and are in need of medical attention.
Right now, what IDF and Israeli forces are doing are air bombardment of northern Gaza mostly, and trying to fend off Hezbollah in the north. These are two fronts which are open right now. Israeli forces have suffered a little bit of casualties, and so has Hezbollah in the north of Israel on the Israel-Lebanon border.
The ongoing skirmishes between Israeli armed forces and fighters from the Lebanese Islamist organization Hezbollah along the border between northern Israel and South Lebanon is on ever since Hamas staged a massive terror strike on Israel, killing over 1,400 Israelis. With Rajesh Pawar and Ashrafani, Bureau Report, India Today.
Israel now is fighting this war against Hamas on 3 major fronts. Gaza, where Shiv and I are currently, the West Bank, and also Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy on its northern borders. And this war, Shiv, is only set to escalate.
It's only set to escalate. 2 weeks, as far as the Israel government is concerned, is absolutely nothing. They say, wait for the next phase. Gaurav and I will continue to report from the front lines, from the West Bank, and from the north. Thanks for watching this special broadcast right here on India Today from southern Israel.